Generative AI is actually entering its next phase, and this phase is focused on creating real customer value, according to a breakdown from venture capital firm Sequoia Capital. And in this article, which they published on their website, which we'll link to in the show notes, Sequoia says we're essentially transitioning from Act One to Act Two of generative AI. Act One is more proving out the technology. Act Two is actually solving real human and therefore customer problems. So they say, quote, generative AI's first year out the gate, Act One, came from the technology out, so to speak. We discovered a new quote unquote hammer, foundation models, and unleashed a wave of novelty apps that were lightweight demonstrations of cool new technology. We now believe that the market is entering Act Two, which will be from the customer back. Act Two will solve human problems end to end. These applications are different in nature than the first apps out of the gate. They tend to use foundation models as a piece of a more comprehensive solution rather than the entire solution. They introduce new editing interfaces, making the workflows stickier and the outputs better. They are often multimodal. So Sequoia has basically outlined that the early winners in this space include people like ChatGPT and Midjourney, who have found product market fit. But overall, the user engagement and retention of a lot of these Gen AI apps and tools remains low. So they're really focused on how do these companies and these tools evolve to actually retain customers. So there's a lot to unpack here, but Sequoia seems to be saying that essentially the Gen AI market is here to stay, and it's moving faster than even the biggest champions of generative AI have anticipated, but there's still some roadblocks to figure out here from a consumer app facing perspective. So, Paul, as you're reading this, what is your take on where we're currently at in the generative AI market?
I mean, I think overall, I agree with their premise here, but I also think a lot of times what happens with not just Sequoia, but the venture capital firms, Silicon Valley in general, is they kind of live in this bubble where they're seeing adoption rates at a certain clip. They're having conversations with really forward-thinking organizations, and I think sometimes they're just too far out ahead of the market a bit in their perception of what's happening. So I don't disagree at all that Act One, is we got these models and now we need to move on and like make them super value based in Act Two. Like I get that, but I also think that the existing like Act One in their terms are still almost largely untapped. Like there's so many use cases people could be doing that they just don't know to do. There's so many professionals who aren't experimenting with this stuff. So many CEOs who still don't really know. I mean, we talked about this on the last episode. There's the adoption is so low still. And, I commonly see, tweets from like an Ethan Malik or just like, I don't think people realize like the capabilities these things have. And if you just learn to prompt a little bit better, what you can unlock with them. But I do think that there's also this challenge of these models aren't normal software. Like an enterprise and a business, they want things to work like software works. Like you buy a thing to do a very specific task and you want it to do it right every time. And that's not how these things work. And so I feel like, we keep coming back to this idea of AI literacy and people really understanding what this stuff is and how it works. And I don't care if we're on Act Five, like until we get literacy right and until people understand at a broader level what this stuff is and what it's capable of, it's not gonna matter as much. So, I don't know. I mean, I think overall, again, I get where they're going. I mean, I think building vertical solutions, building AI agents that take more actions, that are more, tangible in terms of their value, that makes a lot of sense. But I also come back to, like, none of these things even have user guides. Like, we're
Mhm.
putting out these powerful things in the world like a GPT-4, and no one teaches you how to use it. It's like 5 months later, OpenAI releases some guide of, here's best practices of prompting, but it's just not like normal software. And the adoption curves are going to be the same. The value extraction is going to be the same. Like they're using all these analogies about what standard retention rates are and things like that across software. And it's like I don't know that's comparable. But there was one thing that jumped out to me when I was reading it that, people think this all just happened overnight. Like I always come back to this ChatGPT moment at November 30th, 2022. I mean, we're almost coming up on the 1 year anniversary of that day. Um, and how much it changed things and how so many people think AI was like this thing that just sort of showed up 2022. But they had a paragraph in here that said this moment has been decades in the making. 6 decades of Moore's law have given us compute horsepower to process exaflops of data. 4 decades of the internet have given us trillions of tokens worth of training data. 2 decades of mobile and cloud computing have given every human a supercomputer in the palm of their hands. In other words, decades of technological progress have accumulated to create the necessary conditions for generative AI to take flight. So I thought that was a cool frame. And then the other thing that jumped out to me was toward the end, they go into when they published a year ago, their kind of like generative AI document. They were revisiting their thesis. And I respect that they were straight up like, here's everything we got wrong. But the things they got wrong are really significant. Like, so it kind of goes to show, what we say all the time, like nobody has a clue what's going to happen. So their theory of Act Two is as good as any theory I've seen. I have no idea if it's right or not. Like, it makes sense in some cases, but listen to this. They said the first thing here, what we got wrong, things happened quickly. So keep in mind, they published this, what about 45 days or so before ChatGPT came out last year.
Mhm.
They said last year we anticipated it would be nearly a decade before we had intern level code generation, Hollywood quality videos, or human quality speech that didn't sound mechanical. All of those things happened in like 6 months after they wrote this thing. But a quick listen to 11 Labs Voices on TikTok or Runway's AI Film Festival makes it clear the future arrived at warp speed. Um, they didn't anticipate the lack of supply of chips. They did. I mean, they thought verticals would take off sooner. So just, I guess my point is like take all of this, like we say with everything else. You have to absorb this information. You can listen to us talk about it. You can go listen to some other podcasts, go read some books, whatever it is. But you have to kind of like form your own thesis and then figure out what that means to your business and your career. Because even the smartest people, I mean, Sequoia is brilliant. The people doing this stuff, they're the top of their field and have been for decades. One of the most respected firms in the industry. And they get major things wrong in their own thesis. So it's just that things are moving so quickly. It's really hard to look around the corners, like we say. Yeah, that was kind of a few of my initial thoughts on this piece.
So, to that point about trying to look around the corners, like you started to kind of give some advice here. Like, if I'm a business or a business leader or a marketing or business practitioner, trying to wrap my head around this stuff, like, given what Sequoia is talking about here, given what we've just discussed, like, what should I be thinking about when it comes to approaching generative AI tools?
Well, I mean, they toward the end they said, in short, generative AI's biggest problem is not finding use cases or demand or distribution in proving its value. This is like everything we teach corporations all the time. Marketers, business leaders, find use cases that are valuable to you. Like if you're going to get a language model, or you're going to get an AI writing tool, like are you spending 50 hours a month doing transcription of podcasts and summarization of those into blog posts? Like you can get value right now with Act 1 of generative AI. You don't need Act 2 to get a ton of value. So everything we always teach is use case based and problem based. And as long as you're doing those two frameworks, like you're finding use cases that fit what you already do, improve workflows, drive efficiencies in your work, increase productivity, or solving problems more intelligently, like customer churn or audience growth or revenue acceleration, whatever your goals are, like as long as you align the technology you're getting with those and you properly implement them, you're going to get value. You don't have to wait around for GPT-6 to get value out of this stuff. We talk to companies all the time that are doing nothing with this stuff. Like they're just sitting there almost like paralyzed by like too many things, too many opportunities. Just pick something. And like we've talked about the Institute, just writing tools alone.
Yeah.
It's so transformational to our blogging, our podcasting, our content strategy, our social media. Like as a team of now 7, um, I mean, it's got to save us 100 plus hours a month just across
Yeah.
7 people. Um, so that again, like awesome. I love the thesis, love like the big picture thinking from Sequoia about where this is going. Don't, as a listener to this show, get caught up in thinking you need to understand whatever the heck act 2 is and that like you're already behind because you didn't do act 1 right. Like no. Just it's great information, process it, think about it, and then just go find use cases and problems to solve today with the stuff we already have because it's already awesome.